For many endurance athletes, it's their secret weapon, training at altitude. 6,000 feet above sea level in the Pyrenees, athletes are preparing for the London Games. Others choose to take a different route. The authorities are doing everything they can to stop the cheats. But is it a race they can ever win?
We do kind of dedicate our lives to training hard and to getting the best out of ourselves, and then to learn that one of your competitors might have taken an easier route, might have taken a shortcut. It is very frustrating.
Paula Radcliffe is doing naturally what others turn to drugs for. Train this high and the human body produces more of the hormone EPO, erythropoietin. This stimulates the growth of red blood cells, which allows athletes to take on more oxygen and muscles to perform better. Injecting EPO does the same thing, but is banned, and it's an approach she condemns because it puts a question mark over everyone.
I've been in the position of having my performances doubted, and it's wanting to be able to prove in some way that yes, that they were 100% clean, that they were. I mean, I know that inside, and that means a hell of a lot to me. But at the same time, to be able to prove that would be great. But at the moment, the standard of the drug testing isn't quite at that level where everybody can believe in the system.
4 to that. Thank you.
It's lockdown day at the official Olympics testing lab. Samples are in from the London Marathon in April. At the Olympics, the plan is to test 1 in every 2 competitors, including all medalists, and that every day they'll test 400 or so samples, more than at any previous games. The lab's been paid for by GlaxoSmithKline, but it's run by a specialist team from King's College London.
What you see in this lab are methods which are super fast and super sensitive and very robust, covering the range of substances prohibited by World Anti-Doping Agency. This should give the message out to athletes that taking drugs, if you take drugs, you'll get caught. Don't come to London and take drugs. We want drugs to be used safely, not misused. Sport is about integrity and about health and about honesty. We want only clean athletes taking part in the Games.
That might be the ambition, but however clever the science deployed to stop the cheats, doping remains a constant undercurrent. And what's new is that attention is shifting beyond just the athlete to their entourage, the trainers and medics that support them. Dwayne Chambers, the British sprinter controversially allowed back into Olympic competition this year, tested positive in 2003 for a steroid called THG, or the Clear. But behind Chambers was a Californian sports nutritionist, Victor Conti, and an amateur bodybuilder and organic chemist, Patrick Arnold, credited with designing the steroid. And just this summer, US anti-doping authorities charged 7 times Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong with use of banned substances. Unusually, the team behind him, including his doctors allegedly involved, were also charged. They all strongly deny the charges, and Armstrong notes that he's never failed a drug test. To take on that culture, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, has turned to the big pharmaceutical companies for help. Companies like GlaxoSmithKline. Scientists here will now warn them about any new drug that might be attractive to the cheats and how best to test for it.
The Balco case, the most famously one involving Dwayne Chambers, really would indicate that there's a great motivation for an athlete that wants to cheat, or an organisation that wants to help them cheat, to be able to have something that they think WADA doesn't know about. Quite easy to see that the same circumstances could arise if someone could get a hold of a drug that's in a pharmaceutical company's pipeline, could be used with impunity, at least for several years. You'll have to win yourself a gold medal somewhere perhaps. However, with this arrangement, we'll be letting WADA know right away, and forewarned is forearmed.
Bradley Wiggins has emphasised all the way through to his triumphant finish of this year's Tour de France that his win means so much because he races clean. And because doping has dogged the Tour since the late 1990s. Most recently, theories have bounced around the sport of a technique called micro-dosing. Rogue athletes are said to carefully control the amounts of drug they take so their levels never go over allowed limits. A journalist who followed the race through all those years of scandals says an extended web of players made it possible.
It's a combination of using dodgy doctors and shady scientists and also athletes just pursuing an edge themselves. And the ability to do that has obviously been enhanced by the internet. And there's, again, lots of anecdotal evidence to suggest that athletes will talk to each other about which products are particularly useful. There's quite a background of competition to see who can get to those products first, who can avoid detection first. And it's this arms race mentality, I think.
Scientists and athletes will tell you that sport is much cleaner now than it was even a few decades ago. But they'll also concede there are people out there who found ways to work the system, and others who are looking for new ways to increase performance without being caught. The future of doping in sport could prove darker. By studying identical twins, geneticist Tim Spector is discovering that the genes we're born with aren't set in stone. We can alter how each gene behaves, how it's expressed in our bodies. This is the new science of epigenetics, and it could have an impact on sport. He foresees a time when athletes simply take a tablet to turn up the volume of useful genes.
By switching certain genes on and off, you can change the proteins they produce, and depending on which genes you're targeting, have very different effects. For example, we know that certain endurance genes are associated with being a top athlete, and so those endurance long-distance genes, giving you greater lung power, etc., could be turned on.
So in someone who's already a pretty good athlete, would it be worth doing that, do you think? Tweaking in that way?
I think the level of top athletes, just a few % here and there, can have enormous differences on their world rankings. So certainly, if I was a top athlete in the sports business, I'd be thinking of any ways that are legal to change my genes to improve things.
Anti-doping authorities have banned genetic manipulation, and the scientists on the trail of rogue athletes say they have made it harder to cheat. Samples are now stored for 8 years, so if any new test comes up, they can look back to see if an athlete was cheating. Then there's the biological passport. This is a snapshot of an athlete's physiology and should stay constant over time. If it changes, that could be a sign that they've cheated.
I think the authorities believe they're doing quite well. I think they've made significant grounds, and I think in some areas they have. But I worry that we're being presented a makeover, and that actually underground there's still a lot of doping activity going on. And you wonder how winnable the fight is. I mean, if you talk to athletes who've been through the doping experience, who've been banned, they'll say it's something we can never win, it's just a constant battle, because there'll always be somebody looking for an edge, there'll always be new products coming into the market, and there'll always be unscrupulous people.
Paula Radcliffe there makes a protest with Hayley Tullen. Well, we're not...
Back in 2001, Paula Radcliffe took a difficult decision to protest. Russian athlete Olga Yegorova had failed a drugs test before the World Athletics Championships, but was allowed to race. And 10 years later, she says her strong anti-doping stance is about sticking to the values that keep her competing.
Like this?
My biggest goal and my biggest aim is that when I finish my career, I walk away and say, okay, that was the best I could do. And I know that that was everything that I could give, and that was all I could do. And I want to be able to look back with pride. I want my children to be able to look at those performances and say, yeah, Mummy did that, and okay, she worked hard for that. Telephone to Mama. Certainly being able to stand on the top of the rostrum and know that you've worked hard, to look the people you've beaten in the eye and to know that you've done it fairly, that means a huge amount to me.
Regarde, t'as pas regardé?
With the science of doping becoming more sophisticated, and the teams behind the cheats scouring science journals for clues to the next drug, those trying to catch the cheats are struggling to keep up. And for many, the cheats have already done enough to place an element of doubt over every sporting performance.